In the Cleveland Browns system, the people are represented by two separate but equally important groups: the fans who spend their hard-earned money and the executives who waste it. These are their stories.
Mr. Carrier, you are serving as Freddie Kitchens' representation in this matter, correct?
Yes.
Just to make sure you and your client understands the charges, the court will repeat them for you. Freddie Kitchens has been charged by Browns Twitter for the following crimes against the Brownies: impersonating a head coach, felony incompetence, criminal negligence of a locker room, the wrongful firing of Bob Wiley, the disappearance of Rashard Higgins, and the first-degree murder of the 2019 season. How does your client plead?
Not fireable.
Then it is set. Let the trial, Freddie Kitchens, begin.
Ladies and gentlemen of Browns Twitter, the prosecution brings to you what we believe to be an open and shut case. And that case is a simple one. Freddie Kitchens is the most responsible for the collapse of the 2019 season. Sure, we can point fingers at the quarterback or the offensive line, but those disappointments are not the reason for the struggles of this team, but a mere symptom. A symptom of a destructive disease, a viral infection that ate away at the core of this team, called incompetence, brought in by one Freddie Kitchens. We intend to show the fine ladies and gentlemen of Browns Twitter multiple instances of bad play design and bad play calling. See, the players never stood a chance because the hurdle provided to them by their own head coach was impossible to clear. In the 2019 season, we have seen inexplicable losses at the least opportune times in both Denver and Arizona. We have seen the Cleveland Browns locker room become a soap opera. We have evidence that shows that the coach put his own ego ahead of what is best for the team, with the benchings and disappearance of once key role players such as Demarius Randall, Jannard Avery, David Njoku, and Rashard Higgins. See, these are all issues that are not commonplace for a first-year head coach, like I'm sure the defense would like you to believe. See, the defense wants you to believe in a reality that all first-year head coaches are woefully incompetent, which is simply not true. The defense will ask you, the ladies and gentlemen of Browns Twitter, to think about hypotheticals, what ifs. They will tell you tales of conspiracies by the national media and the NFL. They will tell you stories. And while the stories are entertaining, this is not a trial that is taking place on TMZ. So while they will have fantastic and imaginative stories to explain their incompetence, we will humbly have the only thing that matters, which is tangible, hard evidence. Freddie Kitchens is a simple man on the outset. He's large and balding. He has consistently been described as a man who looks like one of the fans. He speaks with a southern accent, and to many he gives off this aura of simplicity. And to those that are in charge of shaping the narratives of the season, that image is what has dominated headlines. Now, I'm not going to deny the mess that this season has been. Mistakes were obviously made, but football is not an individual sport. So if no one man deserves to be responsible for the fortunes of a team, neither does one man deserve all the debt. Freddie Kitchens is a scapegoat for the fans. He's an easy target to point at, whether it be his accent or his physical appearance. But see, Freddie Kitchens isn't the only employee of the Cleveland Browns. Sure, Freddie Kitchens has a job to do, but so do the 12 other coaches and the 53 players on the roster, many of whom are paid more than the head coach, but get to blame the head coach for their own personal lack of motivation and professionalism. See, Freddie has been at blame for his own players' personal conduct, which in a high school environment where the coach is the only paid employee, it makes sense. In college where the coach is the only paid employee, it makes sense. But in an NFL locker room where 50% of the players get paid more than the coach, well, those excuses cannot fly. See, a lot of the prosecution's hard evidence is, in reality, hearsay. It's people talking absolutely on things they know absolutely nothing about. They will show you plays, but they will not know each player's assigned responsibilities. They will tell you of reports that they can only regurgitate because they weren't there. This season was, in fact, an unmistakable disappointment. But it was not a lone disappointment. And it is not a disappointment that will be fixed by firing Freddie Kitchens, but enhanced by his absence and the consequences of it. Ladies and gentlemen of Brown's Twitter, we ask you to consider the serious nature and permanent consequences of firing a head coach after one season yet again. Know the deep hole the franchise and the team would be digging itself, the precedent that would be set, and if you are not 100% sure that Freddie Kitchens is the problem, then it would be irresponsible for the future of this franchise to fire Freddie Kitchens. And I myself find it hard to believe that a coach who has had one of the best first years of any coach in Cleveland's 20-year expansion history, a coach that has had a better first year in Cleveland than Bill Belichick, a coach that has the best division record since Butch Davis, is somehow the sole problem. And that eliminating him will do anything more but satisfy Twitter trolls and ESPN analysts for what? Maybe 3 hours? Then what? Sure, Freddie Kitchens was not ready to lead the Browns to a Super Bowl in his first year. But who was? Freddie Kitchens made first-year head coach mistakes. But he also has made strides for this franchise that, quite frankly, no first-year head coach has ever done, like beating Baltimore, Pittsburgh, and Cincinnati in the same season. See, the truth of the matter, no matter what the prosecution wants you to believe, is that Steve Wilkes went 3-13 and got fired in 1 year. Rob Jasinski in Cleveland went 4-12 and got fired in 1 year. That is the standard. Freddie Kitchens is above the standard and is not fireable after one season. This is a play design for the New England Patriots game. I want everybody to notice two things. First, look at the front that New England is in, and then look at how long they were in said front. Now, this play design involves a tackle pulling and a guard kicking out to handle the tackle's responsibility. But in this front that the New England Patriots are in and have been in for the entire amount and duration of the play clock, this front pretty much ends up in the Browns setting a pick on their own offensive lineman, which created a flat disaster. Now, an experienced head coach, no, not an experienced head coach, I'm sorry, a competent football man would design a play like that with checks so that an embarrassment like that would be avoided. But there were no checks in this play. There were no audibles for this play, and there were no timeouts taken for this play to make sure it didn't get ran, even though there was ample time to avoid this mistake. And this was a costly mistake. It ended up costing the Browns a touchdown in a game that they lost because of turnovers. And this is just another example of how Freddie Kitchens has not set up his players for success. And speaking of players, I even have the written testimony of former NFL quarterback J.T. O'Sullivan, who says plays like these, quote, are things that get people fired in the NFL. Now I'm going to show you this play, and this might be the worst play call of NFL history. It's 3rd and 9, and Freddie Kitchens calls a draw play. Now, they're going to have excuses for why this play happened, but understand that this is just one example of many that I could pull up. And since we don't want this to be a 3-day trial, I am just going to use this play as the example, because there is no defense for this. There's no defense for this being a check. There is no defense for this bad play being called that I care for. Objection! Your Honor, just to make sure that the truth is evident for the people of Brown's Twitter, that was not a play call from Freddie Kitchens. It was a check made by Baker Mayfield. You can see here, he makes the check.
Just trying to.
And Nick Chubb was quoted as saying that the play was not called in the huddle.
Objection sustained.
Rashard Higgins, Jannard Avery, Demarius Randall, David Njoku, all players with a mysterious cloud around their names for this season that were seen as up-and-coming prospects to start. Myles Garrett, who has never been a problem for anybody in the aspect of football other than on the field, all of a sudden, under Freddie Kitchens' leadership, his personal foul rate skyrockets. He starts slamming helmets on top of people. He's getting into fights, all under the watch of Freddie Kitchens. This didn't happen at Texas A&M for Myles. This didn't happen in his first few years in Cleveland for Myles, for teams that were awful. You would think his frustration would be higher his rookie and sophomore year. But no. Only under Freddie Kitchens do we have these weird occurrences happening. Only under Freddie Kitchens do players who have never had discipline problems have discipline problems. Now, the defense may want you to believe that that is a coincidence, but the ladies and gentlemen of Brown's Twitter, I don't believe you to be fools.
Does the Kitchens party care for a rebuttal?
Yes, we do. See, this is the narrative spin that has been a cloud over the team. False reports and incomplete evidence. Sure, there were 3 players disciplined, yes, but wasn't Freddie brought here to hold players accountable? Isn't discipline a part of the job description? Demarius was late to meetings. Rashard and Jannard both refused to enter a game, and David Njoku has not performed in practice. If any other coach decide to discipline a player for those specific reasons, they'd be applauded for it. But now I'm supposed to believe that these are marks against a head coach? That's ridiculous. All the prosecution has showcased is their penchant and their willingness to paint a narrative rather than present objective evidence. The Browns were supposed to be Super Bowl contenders this season. They will finish under 500. The Browns have the most talent on hand since 1999. They are going to finish below 500. The Browns have a proven good GM, a quarterback who the year without Freddie's leadership broke the rookie touchdown record, all the tools on offense, which is actually his preferred side of the ball, where he's supposed to have the most expertise, and they are going to finish 500. I don't want a coach to get fired after 1 year. But how else can you explain this team being this bad if it's not for the head coach being the biggest factor? Because ultimately, that's the biggest change. That's the biggest variable that happened this offseason. So while I don't want to fire or find somebody fireable after 1 year, ladies and gentlemen, we have no choice but to, because then who else is responsible? It's clear to me that Freddie Kitchens is not going to magically turn it around next year because he's got experience. Hell, I've got plenty of experience playing basketball. I'm still no good because ultimately I'm not good enough. Just like Freddie Kitchens is just simply not good enough. And in today's day and age, no matter what the defense wants to tell you and excuses they want to give you, not being good enough, that's fireable. You know, the prosecution said something interesting in their statement. They said the Browns were supposed to be Super Bowl contenders. Super Bowl contenders. With a first-year head coach. A first-year head coach for a franchise that since returning in 1999 has never had anybody in that situation go 500, let alone go to the Super Bowl. See, the expectations for Freddie Kitchens in his first year were to literally make history. Those were never reasonable or realistic expectations. The prosecution insisted that Freddie Kitchens, and Freddie Kitchens alone, was not ready, that everything else on this team was set, and the only thing standing in the way of the 53 men on the Browns roster in the Super Bowl was good old Freddie Kitchens. Well, you know what? I just don't buy that because that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. What we learned this season was that the entire roster was not ready for the type of expectations and attention this season would bring. You had a quarterback lose his temper on the media on multiple occasions. You had multiple players go on Twitter rants. The fact is that this team this year was never going to make it to the Super Bowl regardless of who their coach was, because they, just like my client Freddie Kitchens, simply did not have the experience to know how to live up to those expectations. See, we want to talk about being a good franchises and what model franchises do. We'll see, good franchises don't fire head coaches after 6 or 7 wins in 1 year. Bad franchises do. If the Browns want to emulate the Ravens' success, well, then they ought to emulate their patience. But if the Browns wish to follow in the footsteps of the dysfunctional Raiders and Dan Snyder in Washington, D.C., and continue to be what they have been for the last 20 years, which is a bad franchise, then continue the cycle. Fire Freddie Kitchens, because firing a head coach after 1 year, well, that's what bad franchises do.
Now it's your turn to take a part in this hearing and vote for what you think should be the fate of Freddie Kitchens. Is he fireable or not fireable? Vote in this poll right here.